All right, we're good.
Okay.
Okay, this is Socratic Seminar discussion chapters 1 through 3. Let's go.
All right, Zaire, do you want to read the question real quick?
Yeah, I will.
That
So,
Bartelis.
um, focus on the last 3 pages of chapter 1. In this paragraph that begins already, it was deep summer. Fitzgerald shifts the mood. Discuss how he accomplishes this shift with diction, syntax, and other elements.
All right.
So let's get into it.
So first off, like throughout, I mainly think like the first paragraph within that, there's a lot of like word choice seems different from what he was usually using. He was like the abandoned grass roller that he saw, and he uses like moonlight and shadow when he refers to Gatsby. So I feel like once Gatsby is introduced, or like the outline of him is introduced, he starts getting like the mood starts to get heavier and almost more like depressed.
Yeah, like before he used words like that kind of like were enlightenment more almost. And then like the page before on 17, like he uses like the lamp light bright on his shoes and like the yellow of her hair. And then like when you flip the page, it goes into like deeper like emotion, I guess. And I think that's because it's a silhouette. Like you don't know his actual like face or figure. It's a silhouette, which could like symbolize like something deeper, I guess.
I think that highlights how like you want to go?
No, it's fine.
All right, so I feel like that highlights kind of like how little we know about Gatsby. Like his silhouette is just like we don't even get to see him really. Like he's not described as like physical traits. He's not like emotionally. And the way like the narrator Nick describes him is like far and few between. Like throughout not only like the last 3 pages, but like the 3 chapters that we read so far, we don't really get too deep into who Gatsby really is.
Yeah, definitely.
Even though he's the title, like he's in the title, so you'd think that maybe instead of Nick telling the story, it'd be Gatsby.
Yeah, that's what I personally thought it was going to
be. Yeah.
Yeah. I thought, because in Bartelo's thing, she says discuss how he accomplishes the shift with his diction and syntax and elements. I almost feel like in the first chapter he sort of brings it full circle, or ending it. So like in the beginning when you read, he's talking about all these things, and he's using sort of similar things with using imagery and certain detail with his syntax and diction. And then it sort of breaks away in the middle of the chapter because there's dialogue and he's experiencing and living with these people. And then he sort of brings it back full circle to how he started the first chapter with similarly how he started off the first one. He ended it sort of the same way. So I feel like that allowed the shift to happen more smoothly because the readers were already familiar with the style of what he was doing. So then that brought the first chapter to a nice swift close and a smooth transition between dialogue and then going off into like seeing Gatsby and seeing what he was like and seeing sort of like this silhouette ominous sort of figure, and I feel like as readers we weren't caught off guard from it because we had already become familiar with it in the beginning of the text.
Yeah, well, because the last sentence, like on 21, I was alone again in the darkness, but it starts off, chapter 1 starts off how he had like his feet in sleep and like it basically like he was talking about alone again in the darkness because it refers back to how he was like alone in the darkness starting off the chapter.
Yeah, and I feel like one of my questions actually could connect this because it's asking about like why Gatsby is portrayed as such like a mysterious character. And I feel like Nick almost at least so far, we can say that Nick is almost just as like mysterious to readers because we don't really understand him. He's very contradictive. So, like in the very beginning, he would say that he's open to talk about anyone or talk to anyone. He's like a very friendly person, and then he contradicts himself and says the complete opposite about himself, whether like unwillingly or not. So I feel like there's a reason that the author made Gatsby so mysterious to us, and it's almost like representative of our main character Nick so far.
Yeah. Well, one of my questions was, could you compare Nick to a silhouette? Because like you said, like you don't really know much about him. Like the first chapter is about him and his life, but I feel like you still don't really know him, if that makes sense. Like you don't know like it says his background, but you don't know like his thoughts now, like present thoughts.
Yeah, and it's almost like did you want to finish?
Yeah, you're fine, you're good.
Okay. So it's almost like almost the theme could be like this major like false appearances, like for the sake of I don't think it's reputation, at least from the beginning of what we read, but I feel like people are holding up these like false pretenses about themselves. Like Tom, for example, is cheating on Daisy, but he stays with her anyway instead of just getting that divorce because, during the I believe it's 1922.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, it is.
Around there, at least. Instead of divorcing her, he just cheats on her. And he also mentions the novel, like The Rise of the Colored Empires, or something titled like that.
Yeah.
And it's just like he complains about, the book and how it's like this horrible thing to even think that colored people can like rise and have empires and stuff. So it's almost like setting us back.
Yeah. Well, I just wanted, because you guys brought up some of your questions about Nick, and actually one of my questions was, and Nat, you sort of brought this up of why Nick says what he says at the end of chapter 3, which is like him saying like, I'm the only honest person I've ever known. He sort of like contradicts himself, and it's because in the beginning, so we don't really know what I'm trying to say. So he doesn't really know, we don't know as readers who this guy is. Mm-hmm. And I feel that is definitely purposeful. And we're getting a first person point of view. So we're only sort of seeing it from his world. And by making the person who we're supposed to see through this world through, making him sort of ominous in a sense, as readers, we question his trust. We question his credibility, and how much we can believe what he actually sees is what he's seeing. And that's how I felt reading the book the whole time. I felt like how honest really, like especially when we got to chapter 3, I'm like, well, where is this guy going with it? And how much? Yeah. Mm-hmm. I was like, how much can I really believe what he's saying, which makes me even question, is he really honest, or he just thinks he is because he's surrounded by so much? How do we know that the people that he's interacting with are really what he says they are?
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that comes a lot for like the point of view. It's so odd that like when I was like first reading it, I was so confused. Like, why isn't Gatsby the one telling the story, and why is the author of the story the narrator in his own story? So I feel like a lot of those like conflicting feelings comes from like the point of view, and why is it set during like with him telling the story?
Yeah.
So why do you think that?
What do you mean? That the point of view?
Well, why do you think that the author, Fitzgerald, did it that way? Was it to mess with our perspective of things, or was it maybe for a different reason?
You're throwing out these big questions that I don't have the answer to. I mean,
no, it's mine. I'm just because I also found it confusing, And I think maybe it just goes back to he wants us as readers to almost be hesitant to trust any of the characters, even the one that we're seeing that we're supposed to sort of connect with, which is the person telling us the story.
Yeah. Well, I feel like if it was Gatsby's point of view, you would see like, oh, like these huge parties, like the extravagant this and that, and like, oh, he's living the American dream. Where when you get Nick's point of view, you have like the West Egg and like East Egg, like you have like the different point of views. Whether like he sees the party as like odd and like feels like out of place and stuff. Where if it was Gatsby's point of view, I don't know if you would get the same like perception of the time period as well as like his own thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I get what you're saying, like how you wouldn't get to see how different like the rich versus the poor. You would not get that difference if you get the point of view from like a more upstanding person of society, you wouldn't see the poor because you're not surrounded by that.
Right, like Gatsby knows, like he, from what I can tell from like 1 to 3, like he doesn't leave the house, and when he does, it's kind of like undercover. So all he really sees are like this extravagant lifestyle. Like he doesn't really, at this point of the story, like my point of view, like he doesn't really see like what other kind of world is out there. So I feel like it's for that reason or purpose.
Yeah, I feel like that in the very first like the very first page, chapter 1, it says, whenever you feel like criticizing anyone, just remember that all the people in this world haven't had the advantages that you've had. And I'm almost waiting to see, like, is the advantage that he, I know this might sound weird, but like, is it almost an advantage at this point to not be rich? To get that perspective of society and like feel that, not humbleness, because I don't think Nick is humble enough, but
yeah,
I definitely feel like maybe the advantage he's talking about, or the disadvantage he's talking about, is being rich and being at parties every night and not seeing that realistic view of society.
Yeah. Well,
I think
he does say. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, you're fine, Mal. I've talked enough. You can go.
I was just gonna say that Nick does describe Gatsby as like a victim or like a prey from the Roaring Twenties. So I feel like it, like what Nat says, like it's disadvantage or it's an advantage to not be rich because you weren't looked as the prey if you were not rich. I can't find where, but it's in my notes.
Well, I think it's very it's very interesting what you were talking about, Nat, because I see that. Is it an advantage not to be surrounded by so much luxury, by the richness? Because the rich sort of have this stereotype almost, as they don't know what it's like to be down here on this level. And I think that is maybe, I think that's a huge part of the book, on being on that level. Like whenever you feel like criticizing anyone, just remember that all the people in this world haven't had the advantages that you've had. So there's almost like I don't know what I'm trying. I know what I'm trying to say. I'm done. I had it and I lost it.
I understand.
Like a disconnect between.
Yeah, like a disconnect. There's a disconnect between those two classes.
Yeah.
Right? And we're sort of coming into this novel seeing Gatsby, which he's up here, and then we're seeing Nick and how Nick sees someone who's on a higher level or a higher status than he is.
I think it's because they both live on West Egg, but like I feel like like Nick and Gatsby both live on West Egg, correct?
Yeah, the same place.
Yeah.
So it's like the less fashionable version of East Egg, and like I feel like Gatsby, even though he's a very like ominous character, we don't really know his intentions yet, or what, if he's being honest or not. I think he's attempting to fulfill that spot in East Egg. Like, he's having parties every weekend, inviting people that he doesn't even know over, almost to like tell himself that, yeah, I could be able to live on East Egg. And I feel like that's like that'll show up at least one point later in the story, that Gatsby seems to be trying to be great, like in the title, like The Great Gatsby. I feel like he's trying almost to be that, fulfill that like East Egg standard almost.
I feel like Nick, he could classify as like the lower class, but he's very involved in like the upper class. Like
Yeah, with Daisy.
Yeah, and even like with Tom, like when they go to like that auto shop, like he's very like involved. Like that's like the only word I can think of. Like especially with Daisy too, because I don't know what I'm trying to say. I know I'm trying to say, but like words aren't coming out.
Well, it's
like,
almost like
he's like in the middle. Like I don't know if I would say like low class, because he does live on West Egg, and like he does seem to like go to these nice places and has a salesperson and bonds and this and that, but like he's also not as extravagant as Gatsby is. So I think he kind of like falls in like the middle class, you know, like he has the point of view of both, but he classifies middle.
It's almost like he wants to. Do you think he wants to be like that higher standard, or do you think?
Well, that's the thing. Because we don't know a lot about, at least at this point for now, we don't know a lot about Gatsby.
Yeah.
And that's definitely intentional. We don't know a lot about him right now, so we don't know. Maybe he's trying to fill this void, or maybe he's trying to prove to someone else, or maybe to himself. What?
He does like mention that he's lonely, like the end of chapter 2.
Yeah.
Like he like mentions that he is lonely, so maybe you're right, and like he wants to fulfill that like
that void, or it's like
yeah, maybe he's trying to prove it to maybe someone else or himself that he can live this ordinary life. And who knows, maybe he had we still don't know. There's so much we don't know about him, so there's so many unknown variables about the character.
Yeah.
Like even like when we do meet him, like when Nick goes to the party, like he's still very like mysterious, like, and almost seems like hollow. Like he doesn't, like whenever he talks, it seems very like plain, like no, like not a lot of detail, just very like flat. So it's almost like he might not even want people to know, almost.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that connects to how like contradicting he is, like towards himself. Like he'll say one thing, but he really is the other thing. Like I do agree with you saying like he does. I feel like there's this sense in him that he needs to be up to like the standards, but like then he goes to Gatsby's party and he doesn't fit in, and he doesn't like being there, and he'd rather much probably be at home rather than there.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, I don't know, he's just like, the character himself is so contradictory, and I feel like that's what confuses us, because we want to believe what he says.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden he does or says something that contradicts what he just like did.
Yeah. That's how the character is. But I also think the way that we're feeling about Gatsby right now is sort of similar to at least how I sort of feel about Nick. I feel like I don't know that. I feel like I know this guy, because we were just saying earlier, I think it was Mal saying it, like, we know Nick, but we don't know Nick. We know Gatsby, but we really don't know Gatsby.
Mm-hmm.
And those are those two characters that we're supposed to sort of follow. I mean, the book is The Great Gatsby, so we need to know about him, but it's being told through Nick's eyes. So, and it's like, well, we don't know much about either of these two characters. So
I feel like
there's definitely some there.
I feel like Tom is such like a more easier character to like analyze. Like, so
because you're given so much substance of him.
Yeah, like he goes and cheats on his wife with Myrtle, and then he'll gloat like in Wilson's face about it. And he's just like this arrogant like man who I think like almost could represent like the typical male during this time. Like I feel like the actual author maybe like wanted to show that look, this is like the typical like Tom, like he'll go and cheat on people, and he's just not like that person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, I'm gonna say I love you, and then I'm gonna buy like some other girl dog and like cheat on you with her, and like
But then
Yeah.
he goes and punches and like breaks Myrtle's nose,
yeah,
and like that switch or
Yeah.
that quickness to anger is just like I almost feel like I'm waiting for something else to happen, you know? Like I'm
yeah,
waiting
Yeah.
for Daisy to like something to happen to Daisy, and then like who also like remember A Doll's House,
mhm.
Nora?
Yeah, definitely.
Nora.
Daisy just reminds me of Nora. Like it just seems like she's that.
Like she knows something's wrong, but like she doesn't want to say it because either she's like defending herself. Well, it could be both. She's defending herself or like the marriage because you don't like in that time period. Like if you mention a divorce, it's crazy. So like she's probably defending
Yeah.
like both herself and her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
On page 17 at like the end of the first paragraph on that page, it says, I'm glad it's a girl and I hope she'll be a fool. That's the best thing a girl can be in this world, a beautiful little fool. So like that at that point I was like, this is like Nora. Like towards the end, Nora realized like, hey, this is not the position I want to be in right now. And I feel
Yeah.
like although
When
Daisy you can go.
well, what I was just gonna say is, I love that you and Mal are having like this discussion about Tom and having this discussion about Myrtle and all these other characters, and that's so intentional. We can analyze these characters because we've been given so much of them just through their dialogue. We've been given um, so much substance to work with about their characters, and I feel like that's definitely intentional. And we want substance from these other two characters, but we're getting it from these ones that Nick is coming in and experiencing with.
Yeah.
So
I think Fitzgerald did that purposely because like Gatsby and Nick are both mysterious characters. You don't know a lot about their characters, but it's written purposely. Like it's written with no detail because their characters so far have no detail. Whereas like Tom, Myrtle, and Daisy, they're like extravagant characters and they like talk their, especially Tom, like he just does whatever he wants, no filter. And I feel like Fitzgerald wrote them with no filter. So I feel like he like how he wrote them connects to their character. If that makes
What
sense.
do you guys think about were you still talking?
No, you're good.
no, I was just agreeing.
What do you guys think about Jordan, the girl that they were like setting
The
Nick
golf
up
player,
with?
the golf
Yeah,
player,
like
right?
Yeah.
what do you guys think about her? Because I don't really like. I'm not too fond of
I
her.
don't
I
hate
don't
her.
know why. I don't know why, but like I don't know. She rubs me the wrong way. I don't know what's
Yeah.
wrong with her. Like what makes me not like her, but I just don't like.
Well, I feel like, especially towards the end of chapter 3, like when it says, like, when he starts explaining, like, his everyday life and this and that, like, 57, the second paragraph, it starts for a while, I lost sight. It, like, describes how, like, he said that, like, she cheated in golf and, like, how he didn't, like, want to be with her if he can't, like, she does something like that. And I feel like it's because it's in Nick's perception, or yeah, that we don't perspective that like we don't like her because like that's how like he's not fond of her towards the end. So because of that, we are not. So it's almost like his point of view again. Like, can we like trust him? Like, if another character described her, would we not like? Would we still like her? I feel like that ties in with like the point of view as well.
Well, I think
Matt, go.
I think it kind of ties in with like the like how he's can't get my words out. How Nick said that he was lonely almost like he mentioned that multiple times throughout the first 2 chapters. And then he almost like I think he settles for Jordan. Like he knows like the
I
one
think so
time
too.
she was unhonest about like her golf career or something happened and she was unhonest about it, but he was like, well, whatever, you know? And I feel like he's almost settling for her. And I feel like maybe that's why I don't like her because she's that person that will force him to settle.
Yeah.
You don't think? Because the thing is, I don't know. I don't mind Jordan that much. I don't think I don't hate her. I don't completely like her. I don't know really what to feel about her because
There's a lack of
near the and near the end of chapter 3, Nick tells us that she's like dishonest. I forgot what he said. I wrote it down somewhere. She is something. She's like incurably dishonest or something.
Yeah, I was just reading that. It's page 58. That's very
Yeah.
top 58.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
She was incurably dishonest. She wasn't able to endure being at a disadvantage, and given this unwillingness, I suppose she had already been dealing. Like when I read that, and you read that the rest of that paragraph, Nick is telling us that she is dishonest. But then, like Mal said, and what we were talking about at the beginning of the chat, it all goes back to can we really trust what Nick is saying, and brings me to one of my other questions that I had is, can we trust Nick? Is he truly an honest person, or is that just how he looks at himself? And since we are the readers, seeing it through his eyes, we have no choice but to say yes about it.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, we don't know what to do with this guy. And Jordan, I feel like there's definitely gonna be something going on between them. And I don't know what they're gonna do. Nick and Jordan.
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah.
So there was mention of like remember the dust land or like the ashes?
The Valley of Ashes.
Yeah, the Valley of Ashes.
Yeah, that was weird.
There was like this very brief mention of like literal eyes watching over them.
Yeah, the billboard eyes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then there was like, it was like that was it. There was no like explanation. There was no like meaning, and I don't know if like we could take that as Nick seeing everything, or maybe even like Gatsby, because we get the sense like there's something up with Gatsby because now he's a silhouette and he's a shadow. So clearly there's something hidden in Gatsby. So I almost feel like those eyes could represent like how Gatsby is almost like watch it. Like I just feel like something has to do with Gatsby.
He's such an anonymous character. He's such an anonymous character. You don't know. He's such an unknown. And Fitzgerald definitely does that on purpose, because we don't know anything about the guy who his name is in the book, is the title of the book. That's like watching Harry Potter, not knowing anything about Harry Potter. It throws you off completely as readers. I feel like it throws me off completely.
Yeah. But like, not to backtrack, but like, I don't know if I totally agree if the billboard was Gatsby, because like I have my little notes. And he mentions that like the ashes cover everything in the men too. And like when I like read that, I thought like, you know, like after like wars or something, they describe as like all like the men of the ashes and this and that. So it's almost like something like came over them, and I took that as like the people that were left behind in the roaring 20s, like the people that didn't get involved in like the alcohol and the parties and this and that, and like the billboard was like watching the people that were like left behind and didn't get involved like Gatsby did. That's how I interpreted it. It was like to show like, if you're not part of this extravagant life, then you're gonna get left in the ashes. And like the billboard, like that's just how people are gonna see you. That's how I took it.
Okay, I can see that. I
never thought of it like that.
Yeah, I didn't either.
Yeah. That was good, Mal. That was good.
Oh, thank you. Because it also describes it as like a wasteland. So it's like if you're not in West Egg or East Egg, you're in the wasteland, or like you're in the ashes. Like,
yeah, you're not keeping up. And this is the 1920s too. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's not many settings either. Like there's New York, there's East Egg, West Egg, and then ashes. Like there's no.
Yeah. But we're also only 3 chapters in, so like I don't know like time span wise how, like, did this all happen like in a weekend, or is this like like you know, so like the.
But I think maybe Fitzgerald doesn't give us a setting for that reason, because he allows Nick to describe the setting for us, so that we as readers can't develop any I guess the best word I'm looking, I don't want to say bias, but any sort of, we can't develop our own thing to it. We have to just give in to what Nick is telling us.
Yeah.
And that's the trap. Like, how can we try to extrapolate off, like when we were reading, like, because you know, setting does a huge thing, and as readers, when you hear of like a place like New York City, you automatically think of one thing, or something happening there. But we're sort of forced into giving and allowing for Nick to take us and just sort of believe that what he's telling us is true.
Yeah, like we can't form our own opinions about really anything because we're not really given much to form with.
Do you guys think?
And I know we're only 3 chapters in, but
Yeah,
usually by that time.
Do you guys think that it'll change? Like we'll be given more information within the next coming chapters?
I mean, I feel like when Gatsby gets introduced more, like we'll probably give a lot more detail. I mean, because it's the title of the book, so I feel like we would have to learn something like more about him, and not just him like as a mysterious figure. Because I don't know.
No, I get what you're saying. Like there has to be some point where Gatsby is introduced as a main character that is given background and is given like dialogue and more substance than what we're given now, because he is in the title.
Yeah, and then would presumably be like the main character, him and Nick.
Yeah, I feel like once, and I have a strong belief that something's gonna happen between Nick and George. Once Nick does something, I feel like once something happens to him, or he does something, or he gets involved in something, then that's probably gonna have the Gatsby's gonna have to get involved, whatever happens, and then that's when we're gonna start to pick up and see what, you know, where the story's gonna go, and then maybe it won't be as much towards Nick.
That's time. So we're at a half hour, so we can end on that. All right, we good?
Nice.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna stop it now.